Hi, I'm Amanda from Life Unravelled, and we're here to discuss language development. Now, we've spoken about the language development, but now I'm looking at grammar development. Now, you might think, oh, they're only 4. Why would I worry about grammar development? But it's actually really important that they get a good understanding of grammar as they're growing up. And the way that they do that is through their speech. So when you stop, when you're talking and you stop or take a breath, you know that that's when a full stop would normally be in your sentence. If you have a pause, that's when a comma would be. If you're changing your voice and you're going, I have no idea what's happening, and your voice goes up at the end, then you know that that's going to be a question mark. Now, we know these things, but the kids don't know them yet. So what we have to make sure is that they have that articulation and that variance in their speech, so that when they start writing and they can start doing their grammar, that they have something to fall back on to help them understand when there should be full stops, commas, exclamation marks and question marks. Now, they won't be doing that till they get into school, but now is the time when you're speaking with them to give them that essence of what grammar we have in English. Now, how do they learn and how can we help them? Now, we've already spoken about repeating the things, but other ways that you can help them is through their role playing. So maybe sit down with them and do some role playing with pots and pans, or get them to help you in the kitchen, and they can actually start to do things with you in the kitchen, and you can talk about what's happening. You can go zucchini. Oh, can you say zzz? That makes my tongue buzz. Oh, zzz, zzz, zzz. What other words? I wonder what other words have zzz sound. What does a bee do? Buzz. Oh, I've got a tingly tongue. Zzz, buzz. So you can see how when I've just started with a zucchini while I'm cutting up a zucchini, I've got a whole conversation there about the zzz sound. Now, it doesn't take any time and it's so easy to do, and I'm sure you'll be able to find lots of words that have the different sounds in them. You just have to really have a quick think, and you learn to think very quickly on your feet when you've got 4-year-olds running around. So I'm sure you'll be able to do that. The other thing too is playing with dolls and also talking to other adults. That's really important for them to understand what other sounds there are, and also be able to repeat those things that are happening in their lives. So if you've got a new baby and your little 4-year-old is running around, they'll often want a doll. I know my nephew grabbed a doll when his brother was born and put it to the breast and goes, I'm feeding my baby, at the same time as when my sister-in-law was feeding. And it was just so beautiful, and we all laughed about it. But he was role-playing with the doll what his mum was doing, and we were able to talk through a whole heap of issues and a whole heap of different concepts with him when he was doing that. It was just wonderful to see. So that's the sort of play that you should be seeing in your little 4-year-old, and that's the play that's really important for them. It helps them with their language development, it helps them with their social skills, and it helps them often with their gross motor skills. Another thing you can do is you can listen to others in their conversation. Let the little 4-year-olds be around when you're talking with your friends, as long as it's not about them. And they love listening to that conversation happening. Often if you've got a child that has their second language is English and their first language is something else in Australia, then what you'll find is that they'll be fluent in both languages, but they may be quiet a lot of the time. And what they're doing is listening to the different sounds of the different languages. For instance, if you have an Asian type of language, you use your tongue and your soft palate and your lips and your cheeks in a completely different way to if you're speaking English or German or Spanish. French have another way that they move their tongue sometimes, and the rolling R, and there are certain sounds that we have in different languages, and the kids love to listen to all those different languages. So sometimes even if you put on the radio some Spanish songs, or you have other languages that are integrated into your life, it's great for them to hear those different sounds, because now is the time that they really start to be able to articulate and understand the language. It sort of opens up a whole new world for them. And often you can find activities like language lessons. Some of the kids that I know go off to Chinese in the morning on a Saturday morning, or they have a Spanish play group or a French play group. Now I just want to talk a little bit about spelling, because with 4-year-olds, what we're looking at is they are moving into their getting ready to read. And getting ready to read and then getting ready to write, they will need to know how to spell. Now, spelling is a skill. It's something that you have to learn. It's not phonetic. It's not something that you can try and work out. Often there are words that are just words that you have to learn off by heart, and they are called sight words. Now, being able to read sight words is one thing, but being able to spell them is completely different. But it's really good for the little kids, especially when they're 4, to see a lot of the spelling that's around, to see lots of words that are around, to be able to start to clap the syllables, and to be able to k, a, t, d, o, g, stay. So they can actually start to get the rhythm of the language. And we'll talk a lot more about getting ready to read, the different things you can do for reading and for that. But specifically for spelling, some kids really, really at 4 love to do spelling. And so why discourage them? Get them to start spelling words. One way is to have magnetic letters on the fridge, and you can start spelling different words out. I know when I had my kids when they were little and I was cooking, they always loved being around me. They didn't like going off into another room, and sometimes they did, but when I was cooking, often that they would sit with me while I'm cooking, and I had on the fridge a whole heap of magnetic letters, and we just did different words. So I would say, oh, find an A, and find a N, and find a D. And so they would start to know what the letter looks like, what the symbol looks like. They knew what it sounded like, and then they could pick it out and put it down there. And that helped with the kinesthetic learning, it helped with audio learning, and it helped with visual learning. So remember we spoke about that before, about the kinesthetic, the visual, and the auditory learning, and that's how they will have a preference, but they need to be able to learn through all 3 aspects. And in this way, when they were sorting the letters out on the fridge, it was great for them, and they loved doing it. It wasn't a chore, it wasn't learning, it was just a fun activity that we did. And they'd often go to the fridge and go, oh, can you spell dad? And so I would get the d at d. If you're not sure what words that you can start teaching them, and you actually want to teach them in a sequential way, one of them is called the Magic 100 Words, and that's often used in schools in Australia. There's also the Dolch 100 Words, and they're the basic sight words that you need that compose the majority of our language. Now they're things like I, am, and, not, do, this, that, when. So they're not labelling words, they're not nouns, they're generally just fill-in words that we use. There can be conjunctions, there can be a whole heap of different ones in there. But they start from very simple and they go through to more complex. So I've got here some instances of what the magic words are, and they break them into different colours. Now if you want to start teaching your children about these different words, a good way of doing it is looking at games and flashcards. Now you can make up your own. There's a whole heap of different resources out there. You can buy cards already made up, or you could just get little whiteboards and write on the little whiteboards. You can go to education shops, or there's a couple online that you can look at. I love Book Depository. They often have a whole heap of educational resources, and I'm pretty sure in Australia they still ship for free. Educational shops are great, but sometimes your news agencies are also really great to do. Now, just briefly, when you're learning spelling, you can manipulate words and manipulate letters, but at the end of the day, what they're also going to want to do is start to write. Now, writing is a really important skill. They must be able to hold their pen like a triangle. So for instance, here's your pen. One finger goes on top, your thumb goes to the side, and see how it's like a triangle here? So again, finger on the top, thumb on the side, and this part here. Now that will be different to how a lot of people actually write, but writing in this way means that you have a lot more fine motor movements. If you're writing like this, which I see a lot of people write, okay, that can pull some of the tendons along here and makes it, you can't write as fast. Now, often, the more that you do something, the better you get at it. So people will say to me, I write really fast and I hold my pen like this. I don't have a problem with it, or I hold it like this and I'm okay, or like this. But the conventional way of holding a pencil is in this way. A finger at the top, a thumb on the side, and your finger down here. And this will give the least amount of problems in your wrist and your arm movement and gives you the most accuracy. So why don't you start teaching them really early? Start getting them to write, start getting them to copy over letters. So you do dots and then they copy over the lines. By this age they should be able to be doing lines and circles, so they can actually write all of their letters if they're taught. And if you teach them slowly and in a fun way, then it's not really learning, it's just playing lots of games. Another way is to draw letters in a sandbox and they can copy them. Or when you're at the beach, make with a stick a whole big word, draw their name. The more times you do their name, the better, because then they'll know how to spell their name and to write their name when they get to school. And these sorts of skills mean that if they can do some of these things before they get to school, they can learn to be with other children and socialise with other children. And they can think about that rather than having to think about the academic learning in the first 3 or 4 months of their school life. Thanks for watching Language Development Now We Are 4. Look forward to seeing you in the next course. We've got so much information. Remember, you can go back and look over these in a couple of months' time just to refresh your memory on all the tips and tricks that we've got in here. Look forward to catching you next time. See ya! This video was produced by Imagination Pty Ltd for Life Unravelled. All advice and information given during this course is designed for general use only. If you have any concerns for your child, please seek professional advice as soon as possible. For terms and conditions, please see website www.lifeunravelled.com.